President Biden has been in office for 156 days. And on Thursday, he made a rare appearance on the White House driveway and stood with a bipartisan group of senators. They announced a deal for a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill.
I think it's really important. We've all agreed that none of us got what we wanted. I clearly didn't get all I wanted. They gave more than I think maybe they were inclined to give in the first place.
But he and other Democrats insist they will only pass this bipartisan package if a separate second bill is also passed. That second infrastructure bill would include Democratic priorities aimed at families, children, and communities. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is already criticizing Democrats and President Biden for their plan.
Less than 2 hours after publicly commending our colleagues and actually endorsing the bipartisan agreement, the president took the extraordinary step of threatening to veto it.
Still, Democrats remain divided on what to actually put in that bigger reconciliation package. With Washington so divided, is this deal even possible? And what comes next for the president's agenda? Tonight, we're happy for the first time in more than a year, we have 4 reporters at the table to discuss all of this. Zolan Kanno-Youngs, White House correspondent for the New York Times, Eva McKend, congressional correspondent for Spectrum News, Mike Memoli, White House correspondent for NBC News, and Jake Sherman, founder of Punchbowl News, a political newsletter. Jake, I have to start with you. I was waiting to talk to you all day because this is a wild day. Bipartisanship is so rare in D.C. What's the latest on this? And it seems like things are really, really shaky.
I'm happy to be back in the studio also. Yes, things are very shaky. Joe Biden basically went out and said he had been saying he was going to link these two packages, this hard infrastructure package and the so-called human infrastructure package, which is the care economy and things of that nature. But he never said that both have to pass for him to sign the hard infrastructure package, the bipartisan package. Mm-hmm. Republicans feel like they're being used. The White House says, well, they're being sensitive. They don't, they're just finding an excuse to get to know. Maybe so, but if Joe Biden wants this bipartisanship, if he wants this bill, he's going to have to find a way to get these Republicans back in line. As we sit here right now, they're not in line. I think this deal is threatening to come apart.
And I want to stick with you because Democrats are not on the same page. I'm thinking of trying to get Manchin and Senator Bernie Sanders. What's the likelihood that Democrats will be able to agree with this and come up with something?
Well, I think this entire episode shows that the coalition is very fragile on both sides, right? You're trying to keep together a Democratic Party that ranges from Joe Manchin to Bernie Sanders, as you said, and a Republican Party which actually doesn't want the piece that Bernie Sanders is passing. And frankly, neither does Joe Manchin, a lot of people think. So it's a coalition that I think is really fragile. I think we're entering what is going to be the most frenzied and frantic legislative period in the last decade. I really do. The next 3 months are just going to be absolutely wild.
Eva, I want to come to you. Talk to me a little bit about what your reporting tells you about where Republicans stand, especially as you even have Senator Lindsey Graham telling political Democrats' plans are extortion. What are you hearing?
Well, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell immediately pushed back against this. He does not like this ideal of a dual track. Like Jake said, he feels like Republicans are getting worked, and he has the power to make or break this. Republicans have historically fallen in line when McConnell speaks, so we'll have to see how it goes. Lots of political calculations here. We know that McConnell has spent the last several months talking about the importance of the filibuster and maintaining the filibuster. Now, what better way to preserve that Senate rule and not put more pressure on moderate Democrats than to show that the Senate can work together in a bipartisan fashion? So he has to ultimately decide what he wants to do here. And if he does blow up this infrastructure deal, more pressure is going to be on moderate Democrats to eliminate the filibuster.
And Mike, we call you the Biden whisperer. I know maybe you don't like that, but it's such a great title for you. President Biden, where does he stand on this? How's the White House going to try to massage all of this and possibly get this done?
Well, Mish, first, let's just step back and think about the last 2 weeks for President Biden. This is everything he's wanted to do as president of the United States for his entire career, conducting diplomacy at the highest levels overseas, and now deal-making like he used to in the Senate. The White House clearly today wanted to ride that wave a little longer. They keep touting sort of this historic deal that he, in their view, helped broker. But now the reality sets in. And you saw the president laying the groundwork for this yesterday. First, he went out to the sticks outside the West Wing entrance. We never see that.
We never see that.
That was about supporting the Republicans who've been showing good faith in this process and to buck them up, especially those moderates as well. Then in the East Room, where we were standing next to each other, he was speaking to his fellow Democrats to say, essentially, trust the process. Remember, he said, my party is rational. That was a little bit of optimism, I think.
Yeah.
What we've seen in this process here, at the front end, all the leverage was on the side of the moderates, Manchin and Sinema most conspicuously. But the longer this bipartisan effort dragged through into June, the progressives started to really flex their agenda here and get concerned that they were going to lose out on the opportunity to do big things. And so the president would not have made this commitment of this dual track if the progressive leverage wasn't sufficient enough to do that. And so now Ricchetti has been the operator on the Hill to try to keep the moderates in line. Now it's Ron Klain who's been the voice for progressives, the sort of liaison. He's got to work the outside groups and keep the progressives on board if they can keep this through September, which is realistically this legislative process, how long it's going to take.
And Zolan, you're nodding your head. I want to bring you in. President Biden, he talked about the idea that American democracy needs to work for us to compete with China. When you zoom out and think about what's on the line, not just for this one bill, but for his legacy and his agenda, what's your report and tell you?
Well, I mean, of course, let's look at President Biden's statements and what he introduced as soon as he came into office, right? I mean, he came in and said, I will be focusing on rebuilding roads around America. I will be responsible for improving infrastructure. I will also be responsible for, implementing some of the measures that we've seen on climate change, right? And on that topic, climate change being left out also of this latest deal. So, we've heard these comparisons to FDR. We know that the president cares about those comparisons as well. There's a risk here when you have this two-track. Is he actually going to be able to implement not only your traditional infrastructure, but also some of the policies that he has touted when it comes to climate change, when it comes to human infrastructure, investing in health workers as well. He made a lot of promises early on in those first couple of weeks, and there is a risk here if he's actually going to accomplish that.
And Jake, how's the president going to lean in on this kind of personal style of politics? How's he regarded on Capitol Hill? Can he fix this sort of shaky ground?
Well, the president's aides have done a really good job so far. Steve Ricchetti, Louisa Terrell, and Brian Deese, three of his top aides. I think the president tends to overstate his relationships on Capitol Hill. It might not be a popular thing to say. Congress has changed a lot since 2008 and 2009 when he was in the Senate before he went to the White House. I do think he has relationships, but remember, I mean, the progressive wing of the party was always skeptical of him and was always a little bit worried that he would do what he's doing now, which is cut this big deal with Republicans. And now we're seeing him do that. So I think that he needs to say the right thing to everybody and say nothing publicly. That is what he needs to do to get this done. And I know that sounds right. I know that sounds crude and it sounds unrealistic, but that's what he needs to get done.